Hello, hello, hello. We are back with another amazing professional who's going to be chatting about something that I think a lot of parents don't even ever stop to think about. We've got Jessyka Coulter, who is one of our trusted experts here at Parent Tween Connection. Hi, Jessie. Thank you for being with me.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here again.
Absolutely. I love having you back because you always make me think about things in different ways, which I think is critical for a lot of folks, especially when we're dealing with teens and tweens. But before we get into the meat and potatoes, for anybody who's tuning in, if this is the first time that you've joined us, I'm Clarissa Constantine. I'm the founder of Parent Tween Connection. What is Parent Tween Connection? We are where parents go when they don't know where to go to find the resources that they need. We've got folks like Jessie who are our trusted experts. They're background checked, reference checked. They come highly recommended. And they're a network of folks who say, hey, we're here to weave a tighter web among us as professionals so that we can better support families and teens. And the Parent Tween Foundation is the nonprofit charitable entity that is part of Parent Tween Connection. Our mission is to help bridge the financial gap that so frequently exists between families and professionals like Jessie. You know, professionals need to charge what they charge to keep roofs over heads. Like, we do have houses to pay for and food to eat, but sometimes there's still a gap. So the foundation is, we just got our approval around the holidays between 22 and 23. And we want to be able to say to you, hey, you need help from somebody like Jessie, but you can't quite swing what her tuition rates are. Great. We're here to help bridge the gap. So Jessie, number one, thank you for being with me.
Definitely.
And number two, thank you for the other things that you've done during Empower-a-thon to help grow the foundation and help us launch. Do you want to take a minute and talk about those so that folks get that right out of the gate and know what you can offer them?
Definitely. So I am super happy to tell all of our listeners that I hosted an event not too long ago on May 9th called Your Teen Successful Summer. And I'm happy to say that, Clarissa and her husband Joe were with some of our speakers, as well as 7 other trusted experts. So that event obviously is over. The replays are no longer available for free. But because I am here, because I want to support the foundation, and I don't want parents to miss out on those awesome interviews, because it is officially summer for a lot of us, at least here in the Midwest. So I would love, for parents to get a hold of those interviews, as well as my ebook, The Grumpy Teacher Supplement. I know we'll talk about study skills here in a bit, but there are 11 skills currently in my Love to Learn Study program. And this ebook is an awesome interactive way to really start tweens, teens, college students on the path of learning and implementing those skills. So that bundle is available today for $147. So kind of my thank you for everyone that listens, everyone that wants to donate gets a little something extra.
Awesome. Fantastic. So those links are in all of the descriptions wherever you can find us. So where can you find us? Well, you might be tuning in live through our Facebook group. I have it open on the other monitor so that if you do have questions, ping them to us. Let's have a conversation as Jessie and I chat. This isn't just us, but we're also live on YouTube and we're live on LinkedIn. So if you're watching from any of those places, you can absolutely comment on the video. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. If you're on LinkedIn, make sure to follow us because we've got a ton of more content coming, not just as part of Empower-a-thon, but overall, our mission is to help bring you professionals to help you help your kids. So today, we're talking about a bucket of students, as you said, or like a subset of students that I think don't get a lot of attention because they don't raise any red flags.
Exactly. Yeah. There are plenty of students out there, plenty, parents are watching that might have tweens or teens at home that are like, they're fine. They'll never need a study skills tutor. They'll never need extra help because they always just seem to get it. Yes. They just skate by.
And I can speak to the fact that I was lucky. I was one of those kids that just got it. I put in time to do the work, but generally school came easily to me. I put in the work I did because I was one of those kids that wanted to be as close to the top of my class as I could be, but I could have skated by perfectly effectively with way less effort because school came easily and college came easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got into the real world and I was able to adapt in a lot of cases, but I always wondered, like, why didn't I advance the same way that some of my peers did? And I think part of it is because I didn't learn some of these skills that you focus on and that you teach because I didn't need them.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And that's a big problem.
It is. I mean, unfortunately, it gets to the point where there's always a wall, always a roadblock that happens, especially for students that just get it until they don't. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, whenever I have a parent tell me, oh, this is going so well, I'm really not worried. It's a matter of, okay, but sometime eventually it's not going to go well. It could be a certain teacher,
Right.
It could be a certain class. It could just be a certain learning opportunity at work or at home. I mean, there's so many, unfortunately, kind of ticking time bombs waiting to happen.
I almost think of it like when you look at young adults who just have the super high metabolisms, maybe because they're athletes or they're competitors physically somehow, they never have to pay attention to what they eat. So they don't learn to eat well. And then fast forward 5 or 10 years down the road, they're not still in that competitive sport and they still haven't learned to eat well. And then all of a sudden their body starts changing in certain ways because they don't know how to take care of their body, right? It's the same concept. We still need to be teaching them those skills. So what are some of those skills that we need to make sure that they're learning, even if it seems like everything's super easy and they don't need it? Air quotes, if you're listening to this on the podcast down the road, like I'm emphasizing that like they don't need it, not necessarily the case.
I mean, the first skill that I always teach my program is note taking. And that is simply because of the fact that I know it is pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, the most important study skill I teach. And the thing I've learned with the students that always seem to get it is I've had so many students tell me, well, I don't need to write it down because I already know it, or I don't need to write it down because I'll remember it. And my whole point when it comes to note taking is the fact of, yeah, you might remember it today. You might even remember it 2 weeks from now. But what about 2 years from now when the teacher expects you to remember what that other teacher taught you and you don't have anything to reference? Or maybe, it gets all of a sudden really complicated and you forget the very first step and you're like, well, I can do the last 20 steps, but I don't even know where to start. You got to have those notes.
Well, and I'm also thinking, again, looking at this from down the road, like maybe they do sail through high school and college, but then they get into the working environment, right?
Yes.
Team building or like a lot of environments in work in the professional world require teamwork.
That too. Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have the basic capacity to take notes and you don't know who's responsible for what, even if you swear that you remember these things and you're like, I know that when Jessie and I sat down, Jessie said she was going to do it. But then Jessie comes back and was like, I never said that. You said you were going to do it, Clarissa, right? Note taking can help mitigate that disaster, right? Especially if you take the note and then you share it with the team where it was like very clearly that Jessie said she was going to do it in the meeting. And then, if you didn't do it, right? Like whatever, like that, it can snowball there. So what are some aspects of note taking that kids just don't get?
Well, I feel like that kind of comes down into buckets of its own. So not only the types of students we're talking about, but then also when it comes to how they take their notes. Because I got to tell you, there are so many students that feel like they have to write down everything. And so they spend so much time gathering the information, every word from the slide or every word that's written on the board, that they don't ever actually figure out, okay, did I need to write that down or not? We also have the students that get to the point where they don't ever look at their notes again because they don't think they're useful, or maybe they don't have the right information they need. And so they stop taking them because, well, they've never helped me on a homework. They've never helped me study for that test, or I've never looked at them again. So they're just a waste of time.
And that's rather a chicken and the egg syndrome, isn't it?
It comes down to, your notes are going to feel pointless if you don't write down the right information. I mean, like you said with the team, I immediately went, well, you need soft skills, which is another study skill. But the idea of, if you don't write down like your team members' names, like if you just write down all the tasks that need to happen, but they don't assign who they go to, that's a problem. Or if students take a bunch of notes, like for all their classes in the same notebook, of course they don't know, well, is this for my algebra class or is this for my science class? Hopefully it's obvious. But if you have to spend time flipping through page to page to figure out, is this chapter 3, is this chapter 10, or which class? Of course, it gets to be a hassle unless you do it correctly.
So that speaks to me about organization. That maybe is another skill that kids who just breeze through easily don't develop.
Definitely, because they don't feel like, yeah, I need to have a separate folder for each class, or I don't need to pay attention to the colors, or, does it really matter that I forgot this today? I'm not going to use it anyway. Mm-hmm.
And again, the implications of that in a professional space, or even like in a family space, right? If you are not organized and you can't find the bottle of Tylenol when you've got a headache, and you end up going and buying another bottle of Tylenol because you couldn't find the first one, there's 2 bottles of Tylenol that you now have, and you're going to find that first one as soon as you go buy the second one, because that's just how it works, right? But there's an actual tangible cost to doing that when you don't have organization.
For sure.
But if we go back to the note taking, do you think, so many of our kids these days are tied to their phones. They've grown up with computers. They've grown up with iPads and YouTube.
Yes.
Are you more a proponent of handwritten notes in some cases and or like digitized notes in others? Like, do you see a value for kids in terms of learning this process?
So I would tell you, Clarissa, that the science literally says that if we write something down, like actual pen and paper, but we remember it better long-term versus if we type it up. So I always encourage students. And that's something, when we're talking teens specifically who think they don't even have to take notes because they already get it, that's kind of like, well, that's too much effort. Why would I do that? And so when that happens, the very first place to even start is, okay, all right, listen for that thing you don't already know. When I've had students that tell me the teacher's already told me something she told me 2 weeks ago, or it makes so much sense, it's like, okay, well, listen for that new thing, listen for that thing that you're surprised about. Maybe it was presented in a new way.
Got it. I think about note taking in my world, and I use the ALEXA. Of course, I can't actually say it right now, or it's on the window behind me and it's going to start talking to me. But I'm a big proponent for things that I do actually need to remember long-term, 100% of writing it out myself. But for things where I need to connect with Joe on like, what's the shopping list, I will use the ALEXA, because that way we can both access it on our phones when it's a case of like, I need to be able to communicate my note to somebody else. Definitely. I'll do that. But for sure, if I'm the one going to the store, I'll actually write down the list. And that doesn't happen because I almost never go to the store. But, that I see a value in some cases, but when it's for learning, which is the point of the conversation here, clearly writing it ends up being better. I've had students say to me, well, can't I just make a Quizlet? I'm like, you could, but you're not going to learn it in the same way.
Exactly. And for me, the Quizlet is such a better tool for sitting down for a study session and then also retaining the information. And then the thing is too, on the Quizlet though, when I have students that tell me they hate making flashcards, it's like, okay, yeah, I know it could be a pain in the butt to have to like cut them out or write them all out. But I was like, if you just use a Quizlet, if you're not a visual learner, then that is not going to help you. If you need to be very hands-on, you need to be flipping those physical cards. Sometimes people argue, well, clicking buttons is kinesthetic and hands-on. It's like, yes, but not as much.
Yes, but no.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, okay, fine. Yes, it's technically moving your hands, but it's not the same as moving the pieces on a board or like flipping the cards or writing them out. Yeah.
All right. So note-taking is the number one skill we need to make sure that our kids who are seemingly just breezing through school learn. Definitely. We need to make sure they learn. Organization was the second one. Where are we going from there? What's next that we've got to make sure that they're building in?
I know pretty much every parent I talk to tells me their teens aren't motivated and that their teens do not ever know what homeworks do when, and that they procrastinate. So to me, time management and the idea of motivation, those are 2 other study skills. And the kids that do really, really well, sometimes they're not motivated because they think it's too easy, and so then they claim boredom. And so it's a matter of, okay, how can we make it more challenging for them or more interesting for them? And sometimes that's just making the assignment bigger. Sometimes it's just making it more in depth. Instead of 2 paragraphs, it's 4 paragraphs, or instead of 1 source, you need 3 sources. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to add the motivation piece in for kids who are failing.
How do we do that without them feeling like they're being punished because they're not engaged?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, something I can tell you is that when I was in high school, when my cousin and I actually were in a math class together, and I was taking my notes and, doing all those things because I never just got it in any of my classes. And he was literally sleeping in class. I mean, he just got A's on the test, did just fine without ever having to listen to a word the teacher said. But we were in like pre-calc. So, I mean, if he could have been allowed to do calculus level schoolwork while we were in pre-calc, he wouldn't have been asleep. So that's kind of the first answer is, what's a way we can kind of level it up, and is there a way for students to really prove their knowledge? Because obviously my cousin could do the pre-calc level, but could he do the calc 1? Could he do the calc 2?
Sure.
I never knew because I wasn't in class with them.
Right. Yeah, I think back to calculus and I'm like, I know I got an A. Thank God my teacher gave credit for effort because none of it made a darn bit of sense to me by the end of it. And I just was like, I don't know. Like, I know there are integrals and derivatives, but beyond that, I couldn't tell you. All right. So motivation. So like leveling it up, making it about something that they're curious about or something that they're interested in.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Something that challenges them. Mm-hmm.
So you said motivation. And what was the other one that you just said?
The big one is procrastination. So like time management.
Right.
And with my kids that always get it, that, tell me that homework's a waste of time or that's busy work because, they don't need to do it because they already understand. My challenge to them is, okay, well, how fast can you get it done? Because it's like, as soon as you get the stuff that you think is a waste of time, then that means you can move on to something you actually want to do. Now, obviously, I want them to do the homework. I want them to see that it's learning and that's, a valuable tool. But that first step, sometimes there's no point trying to convince them of that if they're already set in their path that it's a waste of my life. But if you can help them realize you still need to do it, and if you do it, then you get this other thing you really want, then it becomes a game because it's like, okay, can I do, 5 hours worth of homework in 10 minutes because I already get it,
Yeah. Well, and I like the fact that you talked about gamifying it because that makes it fun, right? None of us really wants to do anything that isn't fun.
Or enjoyable or interesting, yes.
Because it's not, right? It's not enjoyable or interesting. Like, why would I torture myself, right? But like, I think even as a business owner, as founder of Parent Tween, like for Empowerthon, there was an insane amount of this is a waste of my time type of stuff that just needed to get done. You know what I mean? And it's like, not like waste of my time, but like copying and pasting things to make sure that it's accessible in 3 different places so that people can find us, right? Like, no, not my favorite activity. Wasn't fun, wasn't interesting, but it just needed to get done. And so I was like, okay, how can I make this as efficient as possible? I would actually take a stopwatch and I would start the stopwatch. And to your point of like, how quickly can I get this done? I'd be like, all right, how quickly can I do one speaker's like setup process? Oh, cool. I just did that in like 7 minutes. Okay, great. Can I do the next one in 6? Right. And like, exactly. Granted, there's a balancing act. Like it still had to be correct. I had to do it accurately, but it was still kind of like gamifying it for me. Like, or the other side of it is like you said, like, how fast can you do it? But like, here's a timer. How much can you get done in that time frame?
Exactly.
That's a skill that I didn't develop until later in life because I was always like, I have no freaking clue how long this project is going to take me. So how do I set time aside for it when I don't know how much time I need to set aside for it?
Which to me kind of gives the whole reason that I'm such a proponent of the idea of a bumper. The idea that if you know the project's due on this day, you always sacrifice that last day or 2 as extra time. Like that is just part of your timeline that you might do nothing, but you might also be working up until the last second. But the idea is that you're doing the editing, you're doing the run-throughs, you're doing the double checking,
the fine-tuning. So like if your assignment is due on Friday, like mentally give yourself an assignment of Wednesday.
Exactly. Always. That's an interesting concept. No matter what level, no matter if we're talking adults, in corporate world, yeah, always a bumper. Yeah, it saved me before, especially if you forget about it. If you didn't write it down like you were supposed to, your calendar, you did whatever you were supposed to do. Yeah.
Okay, so talk to us about calendars because that's part of quote unquote, there's this whole like it's time management, it's task management, like whatever. The bottom line is it's managing the things that need to get done in a time frame within which they're due, right? Definitely. So like how do calendars and planners play in for these kids who don't need to do this kind of thing? Like what are other ways we can teach them to use the calendars or the planners?
Definitely. I mean, I immediately think about, I want students to write down their test dates, and I want them to write it down at the beginning of a semester. So I know that we're pretty much in summer, but the idea that as soon as our kids, if they're in summer school, let alone, as soon as fall starts, get that syllabus for each class and put those due dates, whatever the teacher gives, whatever projects, tests, papers, yada, yada, that goes on the planner, on the calendar right away. But for these kids that don't feel like they need to study because they just, understand it, my goal for them, again, kind of going back to that prove it, is a matter of, okay, you get the study guide, you look at it and you're like, I don't need to fill it out because I already know all this. It's a matter of, okay, we'll have someone test you, whether it's a matter of a friend, a family member, whatever. And if you really do sail through everything, okay, you don't need the 3 days of studying like someone like I did. But at the same time, if you get that on Monday and the test is on Friday, you still want to do it like on Monday and Thursday. I mean, you don't have to necessarily worry about it every day in between. But that's kind of one of my things, is realizing, do I really know it, and making time to study, but at the same time knowing there's a different amount of study needed depending on your understanding.
Got it. Do you, when you say like you want them to put it on a calendar, do you have them typically do more like, again, paper calendars, paper note taking, digital calendars, digital note taking, right? Again, because they're so comfortable with it. Like I personally use multiple ones, but what do you find works for kids?
I do my best to let them choose. I mean, I'm always going to be a paper and pencil person. That's just who I am, because I love my colored pens. I love my like sparkly stuff. And I like all that. But I know, so many people are on their computers all day, every day, especially our students. But it's a matter of, I know for me, I get distracted. I'm supposed to click on this tab and type this up. And then all of a sudden I'm like, well, that tab's open. What's going on over there? And I know if I'm doing it, that every single student, no matter what grade they're in, is doing the same thing. And it's probably worse for them because they've had access to this stuff forever.
Right. Well, because like I know, like I use my digital calendar for appointments, right? And because I do a lot of connecting with people like you, like here's my availability. If you want to connect, you've got the pass to my calendar, literally, right? So it's like, hey, pick a time that works for you, and then I will be there around what works for you. But then I also have a full annual calendar on my wall next to my desk, because my digital calendar, like I can't see the entire year, and I'm planning. Ironically, like planning has not historically been my strength, but I'm looking at some things that are coming up down the road, like even going into 2024, or like as a, SAT and ACT coaches, like we do with helping kids with the prep, looking at it and going, okay, the next ACT is on July 15th, being able to count easily, like how many weeks do we have to fit in appropriate preparation, or do we need to look at September? And so like I use both of them. So I'm curious, like I was just, maybe I should go do like research and find out like what our kids today are doing,
Definitely. I mean, I have students that love apps and that, love the Google Calendar. And, my rule kind of is, if it works for you and you're actually using it, then I'm okay with it. But I also like to encourage them to have something at home, because it not only is that kind of accountability with the parents, but it's also, okay, if it's on a whiteboard in my room, I can't really ignore it. I mean, it's there and it's in your face, but especially for our visual learners. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And again, they may not even realize whether they're more visual or whether they're more auditory or more kinesthetic, which are like the three kind of like big overarching categories of the ways that we learn and that we take in information, right? They may not even have a clue of which way they learn best, so that when they do bump up against that tough concept, they don't know how to help themselves.
Exactly. And that's why the very first part of my program is figuring that out. Yeah. There's all sorts of assessments out there, all sorts of, online quizzes. And I found one that I really like, and I have yet to have a student say, that's not me. And, I've done it several times, and family members done it. And I was like, yep. So this is the one that I use. And that to me, you have to know how you personally learn. Because, I mean, even if you're claiming boredom first, you have to know, is it really boredom? Is it really just not wanting to? Or is it really you're just missing some skills?
Well, and I think that brings us right back around to what the big challenge is for kids like this who just seemingly breeze through. These are not all of them, but these are all skills that they're not learning in the process now because they don't need them.
They don't think they need them. Yeah. And they feel like they feel that there's a big difference between feeling like you need some help because something's not going well. So they're like, okay, I'm more receptive to learning these skills. And their parents are more like, okay, obviously you need some help, versus the kids that just get it and it's like, okay, who cares if I'm not doing this, or oh, they're a little sloppy at that the grades are what matters. There's a big difference between learning the grades and the effort, let alone the skills.
Well, and the other thought that I just had is, even for students who, like, they're doing well in school, but they are putting a lot of time, effort, and energy in. Like you said, like, you were a really diligent note taker, right?
For sure.
Does that mean that they're learning the skills the best way or the most efficient way, right? Like, I'm sure as you developed your skill as a note taker, there were plenty of times that you took way more, you wrote down way more, a whole lot more words than you actually needed to write to get the concept, right? So are they spending a lot of time doing things when that, like, or to learn to do well in school, that they could be more efficient about the way that they do it, right?
There's always a better way to do something. It's just a matter of, do you actually know what that way is? Do you actually want to know what that way is? And
right.
I mean, my goal, especially for the students that just sail, is that they don't suddenly find themselves floundering. We don't want them to be fine until they're suddenly not fine. But the thing is if they don't learn these skills until they have suddenly hit that teacher that they just don't get along with, or they suddenly just don't get the material. Okay, so now they're freaking out because there's something wrong with them because they've never had this problem before.
Right.
They also have no foundation of these skills because they've never used them before. They don't at least know how to use them. And so then you try to do both at the same time, the content and the skills. Whereas if they've had the skills forever, and even though it's been easy, they've known what skills to rely on, they won't really ever hit that roadblock.
Got it. All right. We've explored some stuff today that I think a lot of families don't pay attention to. Because again, these kids aren't usually the ones who are raising red flags in school because they're getting good grades. Exactly. But like you said, like you just wrapped it up saying, like, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're learning. It means that they're getting good grades. And maybe they are learning, but what happens when they don't, when it doesn't come naturally? Really going back to these types of skills and functions is kind of key. So thank God there are people like you for whom these things come more naturally, that you can teach people like me how to do them.
Definitely. Because one of my things is, even if a student understands it today, that doesn't mean that they truly learned it. Because there's a big difference between reading something and comprehending and then actually using the skill and using the information and being able to explain it to somebody else.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to let Jessie get on with her Friday afternoon here. Maybe, I don't know, if you're like me, you've still got appointments this afternoon. But this has been enlightening for me, especially given that I do work in the tutoring world. It's given me some things to think about with my clients. So thank you. And I told y'all listening in at the beginning that there was going to be a shameless plug for a donation, because this is part of the Empower-thon, which is our inaugural fundraiser for Parent Tween Connection. So you can click on the link in the descriptions anywhere that you're finding us to donate directly through Jessie's link. And if you're interested in the bundle, whose full name I cannot remember, Jessie, help me out.
I don't know if I really gave this name a bundle, but it's got the VIP pass for our event, and then it's also got the Grumpy Teacher ebook. There you go. That's
right. Okay, so it's the Your Teen's Best Summer VIP pass, so that you can still access those conversations, and the Grumpy Teacher workbook, and that's $147. If you want those, you can find Jessie through her website. It's, again, that's linked everywhere that you can find us. So Jessie, thank you for your time, for your knowledge. Thank you for being part of the Trusted Expert Network. I'm proud to have you on our team, and I'm going to say over and out to you and to everybody listening. I'm glad you were able to join us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
All right, bye everybody.